Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I would like to discuss news. Some children who organised a protest a little bit ago now, a few weeks ago, against potentially racist policies from a school in London are being threatened with expulsion. Now, as it involves schools, I thought I'd throw my comments into the ring. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So a little bit different this one, but in terms of the background to these protests first, so as I understand it, there were uniform changes, amongst other things, proposed that were attacked as racist. Now, I've been in teaching for over 2 decades now, and and when a new school leadership decides to tighten up school uniform rules, this happens sometimes. You know, a new principal wants to make their mark, especially if they're a new principal. That is, this is their first job as a principal. There's always a bit of a backlash. Now, I am generally a supporter of school uniform. The benefits are mainly twofold. One, you get less bullying as a result of people's dress if it's all the same rules. But two, you are preparing people for the world of work. And yes, not everyone needs to wear smart dress or a tie to work, but many will. And if you look at the last year, look at the fuss some people have made, grown-ups have made about having to wear a face mask in shops for a few minutes. Well, that's not an unusual reaction. That's a reaction I've seen for many years as a teacher. It's the reaction you get from some children having to wear a tie. So is it better to deal with that pointless objection when they're at school age, or wait for them to make the same fuss when they're going to work for the first time? However, you do sometimes get unnecessarily restrictive uniform rules. You know, ones that disproportionately affect people with either cultural or religious standards of dress. You do sometimes get silly uniform rules. Now, most schools, in my experience, adopt a flexible approach to accommodate this, as a workplace would. Only a small number of schools seem to be bellends about it. This school in London decided to be a bellend. One rule held that hijabs should not be too colourful. Now, if I were to be trying to be charitable to the rule maker here, I would say that that is a clumsy rule at best. If the school wanted the hijab incorporated into the uniform, you wouldn't say not too colourful, because that's a bit vague. You would stipulate the permitted colours, like you do for the actual uniform, for the trousers, for the shirts, for the jumpers and so on. You know, black, grey, dark blue, whatever. That being said, coming back to the whole point of a uniform being to prepare pupils for the world of work, that's always what's in my mind. When I look at school uniform rules, it's like, is it helping that? Workplaces that have a uniform policy do not tend to extend that to the hijab that someone may wear. So I'd say that the rule in general is difficult to justify, because what is the intended benefit when you know you're going to get accusations of Islamophobia? After all, if your uniform code is grey trousers or skirt, white shirt or blouse and grey jumper or cardigan, well, the hijab wearer is still wearing all of that. The hijab is additional. Then there was the rule about hairstyles. This is where it was completely out of whack for me. Not allowed hairstyles that will block the view of others. Now, when I was young, that could have been a couple of things. You might have innocently thought this rule was taking a pop at punk rockers. That was in the 80s or the 70s, I suppose, but I remember the 80s. But now we all know what this means. It means no afros, doesn't it? So hundreds of students at the school accused the management of racism. It's also interesting to note that this isn't just kids against the management here. The management haven't just managed to piss off their student body to the point whereby they felt the need to stage a major protest, because there would have been other representations first that were obviously ignored, but also teachers at the school. There are reports of a high turnover of staff, which is always a sign of badly run school, and a vote of no confidence in the principal. No way of this having any impact, because the head teacher in question, Daniel Smith, is the CEO of the academy. But I did a little bit of digging and found the website of this academy and a letter from Mr. Smith on that website introducing himself to parents. I looked at it, it's like, this is last September. He's only just started. He's come in and sparked a wide-ranging protest almost immediately. Now, I've seen this sort of thing in my career before, not always in the school I've been at, but you know, you pay attention. it's not usually as explosively incompetent as this. See, in many cases, you do get some head teachers who are very experienced educators. They've spent considerable time as classroom teachers, then became heads of department, then deputy heads, and finally, some are insane enough to want to become a principal or a head teacher. The name is interchangeable. But some go into the profession, spend as little time teaching as possible before getting into management. Because it's a hard, thankless task and it's really difficult to recruit people to becoming head teachers, this opens the door for potentially less suitable candidates because you've got to have one. Now, don't get my preamble there as an attack on those who haven't spent a lot of time climbing the ladder slowly. In my career, I have actually come across 2 head teachers who were somewhat young, and we're talking about 30 years old as a head, and I didn't work at their schools, but from the outside, you could see that they were well-run schools, and I knew teachers who did there, and they, you know, in both schools, both cases, those heads were very well regarded, and certainly, as I say, led the school well. It's not saying that, you know, inexperienced principals are bound to fail, because at the end of the day, experience, not everyone learns at the same level. Some people just learn very, very quickly, and what might seem like a small amount of experience for one person could well be worth more than 20, 30 years experience for someone else. What I am saying is, because teaching is generally really tough and we get more hindrance from the government than help, you create the conditions for arrogant, unsuitable head teachers to emerge. It simply doesn't matter how much you try and justify certain school rules. A leader always leads by consent. If you don't understand that, you're not going to be a good leader. If you believe a rule is beneficial, if you really deeply believe that, you sell it to your staff and parents at least. You don't try and enforce it on them. Ideally, you'll sell it to the kids as well, but I do accept that not all teenagers have the best judgment. Quite frankly, my teenage years were when I was at my very dumbest. I had better judgment as a 10-year-old than I did as a 15-year-old. But if you have plans, and those plans are opposed by staff and or parents, you don't just charge ahead with them. This person has clearly taken the view, I'm the boss, we're having this rule, I think it's best. You work on refining the rules, or at least keep the discussions going until you've won people over. Within a few months of starting this job, this Daniel Smith had the school in the national press for staging a protest of hundreds of pupils. That was stupid. I don't care how much he believed in his new rules or how innocent they were, despite the fact they bloody well look racist to observers. That protest wasn't unexpected for him. It shouldn't have been anyway. The initial reaction would have been verbal opposition. Indeed it was. It's not like they went straight for the protest. You only get a protest like that when you ignore those representations. He's brushed them off, basically. And to also have your staff opposing you, basically you've messed up big time. You're the head teacher, the leader of the school, and you're completely alone. You're basically a shit leader. But then he decided to, rather than learn from this experience and reevaluate his leadership qualities, instead put oil on the fire. So what's happened now to blow this up? Some parents and pupils have been summoned to a disciplinary meeting with Mr. Smith. Now we can't possibly exclude hundreds of pupils. So now what he's going to do is going to make the mistake of scapegoating a few. I quite liked the quote in the email he sent out. You should be aware that if child's name is found to have committed a serious breach of the Academy's behaviour policy, and if it is deemed that remaining in school would seriously harm the education or welfare of others, consideration will be given to permanently excluding them from the Academy. I would argue that this head teacher's remaining in school is seriously harming the education and welfare of others. Perhaps he should be permanently excluded. But finally, back to that letter that Daniel Smith wrote to parents, and that's the thing I'm going to link in the description below. Just a few months ago when he started the job. See, you read it, and now, this may be with hindsight, but you don't actually see him taking any responsibility in it anywhere. See, I've read a number of letters from new heads in schools and colleges and so on, you know, and maybe this should have been a warning, you know, that he's a shit leader, because he places a responsibility, he talks about his mission, his idea, his vision, and he places a responsibility on his teachers. Fair enough, the teachers have a responsibility to help deliver that vision. He also places a responsibility on parents and carers. Again, fair enough, they're all part and part of the process. I'll tell you what I can't find anywhere in that letter. I can't find anywhere where he says what his responsibilities are. Where's his contribution? Because whenever I've seen these things before, whether it be in a speech or a letter, when we've had new head teachers or principals, they've always said, look, this is what I expect of you, and this is what you're going to get from me in return. I can't see his contribution to this pact anywhere in that letter. You know, it's nowhere. Nowhere at all. Completely absent as far as I can tell. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Sorry to indulge myself, but been a teacher for a long time and it's sort of coming to an end properly. But, you know, can't help be drawn to things where I've actually got some personal insights. But anyway, hope you found the video interesting anyway. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.